Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of What's the Word? Eagle Alumni Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Abby, and today we have a very special behind-the-scenes episode for you, and we're joined with Dr. Amelia Chesley. And Dr. Chesley, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and kind of how this podcast came into being?
For sure. Thanks, Abby. I am Amelia Chesley, like you introduced. I've been kind of obsessed with podcasts for a long time now, 15, 16 years, and never really made one of my own. I've recorded audiobooks and done other audio things, but this has been a fun chance for me to kind of get in on the production side. So aside from my love of podcasts, I am a great English major nerd. I've studied English and writing in 3 different degrees. I've taught at 4 different universities if you count grad student experience. Now I'm here at Embry-Riddle teaching technical writing, mostly a little business writing, some humanities classes, and it's great fun. Aside from just my love of podcasts, the other reason we decided to make this, What's the Word? Eagle Alumni Spotlights, has been because writing and writing matters is the theme of our university's 5-year push to improve teaching and pedagogy and curriculum and student support, and just make sure that we're serving the students as best we can, especially with those communication skills that are so important with anything you go on to do in your life. You're going to need to talk to people, write things down, keep a record, and definitely you've heard that on a lot of the guest interviews that you've done already. So that, plus I just love podcasts. We started doing this a year ago, and that leads me to ask you, Abby, what were your first impressions when I came to you back last summer and I was like, we're really going to do this. Let's make a podcast. What were your thoughts? How did you find it getting started and getting into the production of the show?
Well, first impression, I guess to give a little bit of background to this answer, I'm an aeronautical student at Embry-Riddle, and my first impressions were kind of shock because it's like a pilot making a podcast is kind of out there, but I can roll with it. I like this. It'll be a new fun experience. And it really was. Getting started, it was kind of like tripping over my own feet, I guess, just trying to figure out how to make it sound good, what works, what doesn't work, finding good websites to use to edit the audio, and really and truly getting to meet all of these alumni has been great. I've really enjoyed getting to talk with all of them because most of them are so down to earth, they're really funny, and they've been volunteering their time to talk with me and make a podcast, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, we have to be so grateful to everyone who's agreed to be featured. But yeah, when we got started, we were kind of rotating and researching and trying to find out how to get the best hardware and software, and that's been a fun journey. And really, my role in this podcast has been very backseat supervisor support. I have trusted Abby from the beginning to just get going and get things done, and she's really delivered the whole time. So we both came up with the title, kind of brainstormed there. I've done some of the artwork and the branding and promotion. I do my best to help get referrals from my fellow faculty and my former students, and everywhere we can look. Even recently, I've been meeting locals, like friends of mine out in the world in Prescott who know people who have friends or relatives who've gone to Embry-Riddle. So we've gotten referrals from all over the place, which has been fun. But other than that, really, Abby's the star of the show. So could you tell us, Abby, a little bit like a day in the life, your typical process when you sit down to work on the show? What are the highlights? What are the hard parts, the good parts?
Well, so definitely the highlights, I would say, is getting to talk with all the alums, as I mentioned. And really, once you hit that post button, it feels really good just to have it all come together, really tie in right at the end. I mean, I couldn't have done it without Dr. Chesley. Whenever I tell her, like, hey, I don't have any audio for this week, I magically have an email in the morning with a new person wanting to get interviewed, which I really, really appreciate. She's been great getting new referrals and finding all of these amazing people to interview. But a typical day, I start out, I'll go through my emails and schedule some interviews and give information out about the podcast. We do all of our interviewing on Zoom, so I'll make all the meetings and send out the links to all of them. Editing wise, it's pretty straightforward. I will go in and take the audio recording from Zoom that Zoom creates, and I will edit it down, kind of make it sound a little bit better, get rid of any of the awkward pauses or the long anything like that. And afterwards, then I will go and I will make a transcript of it using a different website. It'll transcribe it for me.
Once I receive the transcript from that website, I will make sure that there's no spelling errors or typos in it, and if there are, I'll correct those before we release the episode for that week. From there, I will set the audio to be released at a predetermined time. It's always Thursday night at midnight for whichever week. That way, it'll be up and running that Friday morning for everyone to go in and listen to it.
That's typically what a typical day looks like.
Yeah, how much time do you feel like you spend, like, on average?
On average? Oh, that's a good question. It really depends on the audio, I gotta say. If the interview flowed really, really well and there's not a lot of editing I have to do, it's pretty quick, maybe 30 minutes to an hour editing. If we kind of had a bumpy start, a little bit of stumbles in the interview, it might take me a little bit longer, just because I'm still learning myself how to edit audio. It's been a learning process throughout, and I've learned quite a lot of little tips and tricks, so I have been getting a lot faster at it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's always more to learn, always ways to make things just work a little more smoothly.
Yes.
But awesome.
Yes. And so, Dr. Chesley, now that we have been doing this for a full year, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, 1 year on. I guess my main feeling about this project we've been working on is I'm just really grateful, and I'm really happy and grateful that you've gotten so much out of it as a student research assistant and learned and grown, and that you have fun with the process. That's the best, of course. And I really hope that it keeps going. Like, I think we've built in a pretty good workflow where we have a fairly, generous is not the right word. We have a fairly generous timeline for ourselves, and we do our best, and we keep things simple. So our interviews, you try to keep them less than half hour. Then you can shrink them down however is needed for a quick little episode. Hopefully, like, the dream is, since next year, this upcoming academic year, is your last year at Embry-Riddle, we're going to have to find a replacement for you. So once this goes out, we may have to put out a little call for applicants and see if we can get someone to be your apprentice and learn all the things that you have learned, take on the project, and be ready to carry it into the future, which who knows where that will lead. There's always going to be more graduates. One other thing we've built into our system is going around to capstone classes and asking in advance, like, do you want to be on our podcast? So hopefully we'll have an ongoing stream of referrals.
Yes.
Which would be great. I feel like we should ask about advice. Do you have advice maybe for that future person that we hire once you are about to graduate? What's the biggest thing that you've learned, or the lesson that you want to pass on?
So when you are first learning, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Because I kind of had to learn that the hard way, not just with this podcast, but with everything. It's all going to work out in the end, and you're going to do great. Specifically related to the podcast, I would have to say, really listen to what the alumni have to say during the interview, because a lot of them have made mistakes or experienced things that everybody will experience at some point. And so they have a lot of good knowledge and wisdom that you can apply moving forward in life, which is something that I've definitely started doing.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much advice that the alumni we've featured have given us. First of all, just their time that they're able to spend kind of thinking back and sharing their memories is so fun. And then to pass on lessons learned and life advice and wisdom for the next generation is great. So would you say you have a favorite piece of advice that you've heard we've got 17 episodes in the book so far? I guess 15 of those are alumni interviews, yeah?
Yes. So I would probably have to say one of my favorite pieces of advice is from one of our more recent episodes, from Jordan Savoy's episode. And she tells the listeners to experience everything that you can before you graduate and you have to go join the real world and everything, and live it up to the fullest, which follows a lot with kind of a theme with our interviews. But I would have to say the way that she's worded it is definitely my favorite. So you guys should definitely go give that episode a listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, she had some great stuff to say in
Yes.
the whole interview, for sure.
Yes.
And you're right that's been a theme, touching on like life is short. We need to grab all of it without putting pressure on ourselves too much, like you said. But to really be open, that's something I've heard our guests, something I hear our guests say a lot is just be open and be willing to pivot or change direction, just see what happens. Be willing to follow your path, even if it's not what you expect. So I think that's something that's really valuable and encouraging. And if I had to pinpoint like one specific quote from our little catalog of advice, I really liked what Chris Walton said about wearing sunscreen. Even though, and he said in the interview too, like, it sounds silly, but that principle of like, be grateful and take care of your body, really make sure that you're not taking advantage of that precious resource, even if it feels like you might live forever, you know?
Right. Oh no, yeah. I definitely agree. That was definitely very good, down to earth kind of, everybody can use it. Even now, as a college student, got to take care of yourself.
Yes, get enough sleep, all that stuff. I didn't learn that lesson until I was way older. But yeah, we kind of talked a little bit already about the future of the podcast and how we hope that it will keep going and growing, and it will become a great archive of our campus history and network connections across all kinds of majors. So we have done a lot of work to get more aviation graduates in the podcast feed. So Chris Walton's just one of them. And we're working hard to get more from the College of Arts and Sciences, like psychology and forensics and business and global security. We've got a few of those, but really hoping to branch out, get more and more and more. So on the horizon, there's potential interviews we're hoping to get lined up with some Air Force folks, not just Air Force pilots, but Air Force engineers, and some astronomy and physics as well. So stay tuned for all of that. And thanks again, Abby, for just doing all the work to keep this podcast going. Really, it couldn't exist if you weren't willing to put in that time. And I hope everyone appreciates it as much as I do.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for all of your help and your input. 'Cause whenever I run into a roadblock, you're always there to help me out. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate this opportunity.
And that wraps up this week's special behind-the-scenes episode of What's the Word? Eagle Alumni Spotlight Podcast. Thank you all for giving us a listen. If you are new to our channel, be sure to find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. But stay tuned for more.
This podcast is supported by the Department of Humanities and Communication at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona. Abigail Bradbury is our host and producer. Matthew Haslam is the department chair. And I'm Amelia Chesley, assistant professor of professional writing. The intro and outro music is Wanderer by Alex. Many thanks to the Prescott Campus Writing and Design Lab for hosting our transcripts. Find us where most podcasts are found, and please do reach out if you are a Prescott Campus alum. We'd love to feature you in a future episode.